right, June, Holley, I'm so excited to have you on the Yes We Rise podcast. Thanks so much for joining. Will you introduce yourself so folks know who I have the delight of speaking to today?
Okay, so my name is June Holley, and I'm 75 years old.
Woohoo!
So just pointing that out so
Mm.
people realize, I've been around the block once or twice or three times.
Right?
So I live right in Athens, Ohio, which is part of the Appalachian region, the northern part. And I've been there for, I was just realizing it's 40 some years now, and just feel really anchored in this wonderful community of
Mm.
the Appalachian part of Ohio and even Appalachia altogether,
Hmm.
where I've, spent virtually my adult life. And I have, I started doing a lot of grassroots organizing here in the Appalachian Ohio region uh, 40 years ago,
Hmm.
and did did a really interesting experiment with
Hmm.
economic networks
Hmm.
through an organization called ACENET, the Appalachian Center for Economic Networks, where we helped, in particular, low-income food entrepreneurs by creating a kitchen incubator.
Hmm.
And then in the last 16 years or so, I've been a consultant of networks. So I'm really interested in how we can collaborate together to make more things happen than if we
Yeah.
tried to work by ourselves. And now I'm writing a book called
Hmm.
Transformation, Co-creating a World That's Good for All of Us, that's
Hmm.
taking network stuff to the next level.
That's so great. And when is that due to come out, June?
I'm not even sure it's going to exactly be a book. It might be
Hmm.
more of a
Yeah.
website,
Yeah.
more so it could be more interactive and
Sure.
updated because things are
Yeah.
happening so quickly.
Okay,
But
sure.
I'm starting after this conversation, as a matter of fact,
Awesome.
writing blog posts. So I'm going to start
Great.
with writing some blog posts on
Hmm.
that. And it's not going to be so much one perspective as I'm really trying to gather all the great thinking that's happening out there about change and transformation,
Hmm.
and just showing people how they can kind of sift through that and sort through it to figure out what can inspire them and move them forward.
Yeah, I love that. So helping to put those tools and resources in the hands of folks in an accessible way so they can
Mhm.
create that change. And I love the way you spoke about networks to make more things happen collectively than at the individual level. So I want to go back a little bit to Athens and then come back to networks and ask you a little bit more about, why networks for people who are new to this collaborative scale work. Um, we'll talk about that. And folks can also learn more about some great resources we pulled from June and Network Weaver in episode 48. And credited, June has done a lot of really tremendous work around really helping networks become more. mm, More effective, but also help them thrive, help them to adapt, help them to change, and really kind of meet what the need is as it arises in the moment. So we'll come back to networks, but tell us about Athens. What is Athens likes? What is the part of the Appalachian range that you're like, and what do you love about Athens, the
Well,
place?
well, uh, it's so interesting that 40 some years ago, a group of us were involved in food cooperatives,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a communities committee that was trying to figure out how could we create a cooperative community, not a commune or
Right.
just a land development, but something that where people cooperated. And so a
Yeah.
group of us decided on Athens because
Huh.
at visiting it, we could see it was really innovative already. This was back in 1980.
Huh.
And so we were drawn to the innovative capacity that was already here. And so
Yeah.
a group of us actually moved and formed a community here
Oh,
to do
interesting.
social change work. Everybody in the community wanted to help create, a world that was better for all of us. And so, we did that.
Mm.
And I think that at that time there were actually 17 different kinds of communities
Oh,
all around Athens, and so we just loved that.
yeah.
So I think the thing about Athens is that it's a small town, and
Hmm.
um, people know each other, and
Hmm.
it was always very relational. Uh, so people spend a lot of time getting to know each other, helping each other out. There are incredible mutual kind of aid, informal
Hmm.
mutual aid, and helping things happening in this community. And um, um, I also love it. I love the climate here. There's
Yeah.
four.
It's
There's four
important.
seasons. There's 4 seasons, but it has a really long growing season.
Mm.
And I come from 17 generations of American farmers, believe
Mm.
it or not.
Yeah.
And
Wild.
and
Yeah.
so I just love to. I have a very small house in the center of the old part of town, and with a
Mm.
small yard. But every inch, there's not a blade of grass in this yard. It's
Huh.
all fruit trees, perennials, and lots of vegetables all mixed together.
Yeah.
And so
Awesome.
I love it because it's a great climate for growing
Hmm.
things.
I love that. That's so great. So not only the place, but innovation, but the ability to dive in and do what you want. And I love that you're in town. You it sounds like you can probably connect with people, but you have things growing in every square inch of where you are. So connections at multiple levels. That's awesome.
Right, right,
And the
right.
experiment probably continues in different ways for social
Right,
change.
exactly, exactly. And the community is now very collaborative. People, I remember way back when AceNet, we made a decision that we were never going to write a grant just by ourselves anymore.
Hmm.
Every
Uh-huh.
grant was going to be collaborative, and that was like the first step, I
Uh-huh.
think, in just really moving to a more collaborative community. So you look around now, and even though I'm not part of AceNet and haven't been for a long, long time, there's
Mm-hmm.
still just tremendous amount of collaboration happening in this community,
That's great.
in every sector of experience that you look at.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit more, June, about networks. What do you mean by that? And
Mm.
and why networks? Why are networks important?
Right. So I don't I think networks mean a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like my background's as a sociologist, whatever that means. And
Mm-hmm.
so I look at networks first as just about relationships and the patterns that they create.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not necessarily about an organizational form, which is the way a lot of people use networks now, a formal
Mm-hmm.
network,
Mm-hmm.
like the food network, or
Mm-hmm.
something where people get together and they decide on a purpose, which is a wonderful and important thing. But the term network is much broader than that, and uh, it's really kind of saying to people, hey, we need to pay attention to relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what makes a difference, is when we get to
Mm.
know each other,
Yeah.
know each other's strengths and interests and capacities and challenges, then we can really pull together people for collaborative projects. And they're going to be much more likely to work because we really know each other, we care about each other deeply. And so we're willing to deal with the hard stuff that comes up and really make things work in a new way. And I feel that relational quality of life is something that we're starting to realize is critical, that
Mm.
it's not just an add-on, but we need every meeting that we have with other people needs to be a venue for helping us deepen our relationships with each
Mm-hmm.
other. And we need to
Yeah.
spend explicit time on that. So when you start a meeting, you need to have check-ins. And if somebody's having a problem, you stop right there
Mm-hmm.
and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we're going to spend some time, helping this person think this
Mm-hmm.
through before you go on to the so-called work of the meeting. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that the relationship building, time spent on relationships is our work. That is our
Mm-hmm.
work, because that's what needs to shift from a world of where, of separation that we've been brought up where, we each have our little desk in school and we're waiting for and if we collaborate, it's called cheating.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm. Right.
so
What
you
a good point.
right. So we need to, that's really deep in us. And we
Mm.
need to really explicitly work on shifting that to it being about the way we are in the world is collaborative, and it's about caring about
Mm-hmm.
each other and supporting each other and working together.
Mm. I love that. Hmm. I have a more specific question about groups who have
Yeah.
worked together for a long time. So, one of the groups we work with is a collaborative that's been together for about 7 years. There's been some change over time in leadership, as naturally
Hmm.
happens. And it it seems like in this a lot of world of online meetings right now, there's a little stagnation happening. And maybe there
Hmm.
hasn't been things are happening at the transactional level a little bit, this update, that update,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
not the deep work of relationship building. So with an example like that, how have you seen that groups have moved more into building relationships as new partners have come into networks and there's been change to still
Yeah.
continue to do the work because that's what keeps people engaged, but those relationships, as you
Hmm.
said, are the key ingredient to doing the work, the relationships and trust. That's where it all is, and that just takes time.
Okay, so I think you got to understand that networks are often and probably need to be quite large,
Hmm.
lots of relationships, and they
Yeah.
don't all have to be formal.
Yeah.
And then how you organize the work, though, that's where people get a little confused.
Yeah.
So usually what happens is out of that larger network, a kind of collaborative or collective emerges that tries to do the work of the network. And I think and then they try to figure out what they're going to do all together and
Hmm.
try to consensus on one thing. Well, I think that's where then you tend to things get stagnant after a while,
Yeah.
because everybody doesn't want to do the
Yeah.
same thing. And so I think the missing piece is what I
Hmm.
call self-organizing or clustering. And
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
where networks need to spend a lot of time figuring out who wants to do what, who's
Hmm.
interested in doing what, and not just do one thing, but
Hmm.
get people to try out different ways of shifting the system or whatever. So you might have one group working on, one aspect, like maybe they're working on, how can we get food from farmers to food pantries and have that be a win-win, or in another group saying, how can we get food out to really fresh vegetables out to really rural areas, or so you have people are working on different parts of the food system, but they need to communicate about what they're doing, because often there's like lots of nice synergies.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
for example, in our community, the farmers are now being paid to give their excess produce after the farmers market to these traveling vegetable trucks that
Uh-huh.
go out, and people are paying what they can for it. And it's actually working out that some people pay a lot for their vegetables and some people pay nothing, and it
Hmm.
actually makes the whole system work. So they're combining
Hmm.
some of these different aspects of experiments that they've already tried. So it's this idea that we need tons of experimentation. We don't need to agree, and we don't need to agree on very much. In networks, people don't realize you don't really, you don't really need to agree on anything. If you have those relationships, you know each other, and you know how to cluster and
Mm-hmm.
find each other and work on different projects
Mm-hmm.
collaboratively, and then share what you're learning with each other to
Mm-hmm.
find synergies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's I think that's what energizes networks.
Yeah.
If you have a network that's kind of flailing, it's because people aren't getting to work. They're not getting help and support in working on what they want to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And so sessions where people are really exploring, like you break them up into groups and to explore different kinds of things. And then
Mm-hmm.
maybe some of those groups go on to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why things like innovation funds are really great, because then you can have a little pot of money and people can get seed funds to
Mm-hmm.
maybe get a facilitator for their group if they're not really good at facilitation, or get some resources. So people marginalized groups are being able to fully participate
Mm-hmm.
by having a stipend. But I found that when people are organizing, they get a chance to work on what they care about and what they think is going to make a difference. Then people are really energized.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And it takes that time of just getting together, sharing ideas, connecting with each other for those relationships to deepen or rebuild, especially after we've been online a lot of times. It can certainly happen online, but I think that the in-person space, it's just a different deepening to some degree of those
Well,
relationships.
I work online totally. I don't
Yeah.
do any face-to-face work
Interesting.
anymore.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I really think that we need to stop saying that you can't develop deep relationships online. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah, there probably are the pheromones and stuff like that are good face to face, but I have incredibly deep relationships with people I
Mm.
have never seen, I will never see, because they
Uh-huh.
live on all parts of the
Yeah.
world. And if we're going to be world citizens, and I think
Mm-hmm.
we need to, we have to learn how to build deep, deep relationships online. And I think and I've seen really good facilitation that you get lots of time in breakout rooms, you really
Mm-hmm.
get to, and it's the questions, what is it that you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're really talking about things that are deep, then you develop deep relationships. And if
Mm-hmm.
you really um, you know give that space for that,
Mm-hmm.
I think you really can. And we need to, yes, we
Mm-hmm.
need to have those face to face. We need to be very place based, because that's where, that's real,
Mm-hmm.
um in a way that, world stuff sometimes isn't very real. But we also need to be connecting with networks that are in Africa, in New Zealand. There's all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of great stuff
Yeah.
happening. And if we don't know about, if we aren't both deeply rooted in our
Mm-hmm.
place and really deeply connected with other parts of the world
Mm-hmm.
where we can learn, and because, we need to change.
Yeah.
The whole world needs to shift.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best examples it of where we need to go are in places like Africa, where
Mm-hmm.
there's still, rich cultures of ritual and relationship with the land. Because see, relationships isn't just about people,
Mm-hmm.
it's about everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
about all of nature. It's about all the beings in the world. And right now, we don't even know how to recognize bird songs, or we
Mm-hmm.
don't really, understand what plants really like each other and want to be together. I mean, there's so much uh, attention we need to pay for all the relationships of everything around us. And we can learn about that from cultures all around the world where
So
who
beautifully
haven't
said.
been so say westernized,
Mm-hmm.
and this idea of separation and power over and
Mm.
those kinds of things that really are destroying our planet.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, so beautifully said, June. So not separation and power over relationships of all, birdsong, people and place. So tell us
Mhm.
what's inspiring you from around the globe a little bit. What are some of those
Yeah, yeah.
for listeners? June and I chatted a month or so ago, and June, you just talked about the thousands of networks that are taking place around the
Ah,
globe that folks in North America or the United States really don't know about, and the ways that
right.
innovation's taking place in
Right.
collaboration that's juicy and transformative. What
Yeah,
what are
yeah,
you
yeah.
seeing out there across
Oh,
the
it's
globe that's
it's
inspiring you?
amazing. It is so amazing. I mean, stuff in India, this societal thinking. There's a group there that are really understanding, like, how to build sort of scale, they call scale in from the beginning. Like, we need to not just be a little fringe kind of thing happening. And well, like you think local food, that's been a fringe thing for a really long time.
Mm,
Where do, how does it move to the place where it is really defining our food systems?
mm,
And so there's a lot that we need to learn, and like in India, they're figuring a lot of that kind of stuff out. I'm also being, I mean, what we call indigenous cultures, which I'm not sure the right word, but cultures that still remember, before this Western dominance culture has kind of taken over. There's so many remnants that we need.
mm,
In fact, in our own, like I've just been realizing, you know, there there is a lot, even in Western European culture,
mm,
that was before sort of this industrialization and such happened. There's lots of beautiful connection to land and spirit and
mm,
whatever. So kind of looking for, what are those models of relationship
mm,
that we can, I mean, it's not, we don't need to slavishly try to bring back, because so much of the knowledge has been lost.
mm,
um we need to co-create new cultures that are really healthy and juicy and collaborative, and
mm,
collaborative, that we're co-designing. In fact,
mm,
that's the whole a key process of networks, is co-designing, trying out, experimenting, trying things out. And that's what I'm so inspired by all over the world, is
mm, mm,
is but the concern is that there are all these networks, but the networks haven't figured out yet how to network.
mm,
And without getting overwhelmed,
mm,
you can only have so many relationships. But how do you stay in touch and kind of sort of align and find those synergies between your networks and other networks? And so I'm really encouraging people to look around and find others. And I've started to actually draw some, you know, circles of all the networks. Like just in the United States, there are
mm,
so many food system networks,
mm,
whether it's sustainable ag
mm,
or local food systems or food entrepreneurs or indigenous communities, that exciting things that are happening in terms of reviving some old foodways. But
mm,
these groups are hardly talking to each other. And so
mm.
I just, anybody listening to this, who are other networks working sort of in your surrounding space? And can you just take an hour and call somebody up, zoom them in, and find out what they're doing? And are there
Mhm.
any little ways that your networks might connect, or ways that you might communicate with each other lightly? This doesn't have to be some new big heavy network, but we need to know what each other's doing and know how to support each other and find those synergies.
Love that. Mm. And to kind of bring it to a deeper level in terms of, so that was such a great example, June, of what folks can do in their everyday life if they are wanting to, a lot
Mhm.
of like, I want to do something but I don't know how to start. Where do I engage, and so if they're not part of a network yet, just finding someone who's connected to the work they want to do or some kind of change they want to see, and just making a call or zooming and connecting, learning more, such a
Mhm.
great step. What other ways are you seeing around the globe or in the States, um, where you really see network scale stuff happening that's creating really awesome change? Like what kind of like practical,
Yeah, yeah.
ways that people are clustering and experimenting? Like what's moving the needle that you're seeing around the globe?
Well, like the Food Policy Council network out of
Mm,
Johns Hopkins, for example, they
mm-hmm,
have created a network of 365 local food policy councils and state food policy councils.
mm,
They have all kinds of ways that they are clustering to learn about, like, how do we add equity into what we're doing, or they have
mm,
so they have lots of sort of communities of practice that are
mm-hmm,
exploring different ways. They meet together. I know I did a session with them a couple of years ago on, how do you make more effective networks in
mm-hmm,
your local community, you know whatever. But that's a group that's gotten really some great size to it. It is influencing. They every year they put out like a big, beautiful rainbow circle that shows all the different ways that they've
mm,
impacted policy on
mm,
both the local, state, and now they're starting to introduce, federal policy. So
mm-hmm,
that's just one of many, many exciting examples. I know, like, the Nature Conservancy is doing exciting work with indigenous groups
mm,
all, around the globe that is
mm,
is just, um, you talk about, okay, where are people who really know how to take, take care and be in relationship with land and places.
mm-hmm.
And they're just doing some fabulous network building activities, around that. I mean, I could
Mm-hmm.
go
Yeah.
on and on. There are just, I mean, there are so many hundreds of thousands of networks out there. And, I think for people just starting to think that, you can do, like, going on the Network Weaver site and reading blog posts about can just get you so inspired
Mm-hmm.
about networks. And you can just do a little research, um, and find out there's probably somebody already working in the space you're interested in. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need to usually start your own network.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
um, there are usually people doing that and people that you can learn from. And there are now quite a number of really excellent books on forming networks if you feel like you want to start a new network. Um, so uh, and learning about self-organizing, that's the missing piece for a lot of
Mm.
networks. And there's lots of free resources on that Network
Mm-hmm.
Weaver site
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah, we'll
can
include
really
that.
help you out. So
That's great.
lots of concrete things that you can
Mm-hmm.
do if you but I think instead of thinking about starting a new organization, find a network or network people who are already working in the space that you want. I
Thank you.
think nonprofits are kind of, they're becoming old school. And I
Uh-huh.
think the place to put your energy is on networks.
Love that.
And because then you can work at a much bigger scale
Mm-hmm.
than just a single organization can.
Yeah. Love that. That's great. So we'll include the links to the Network Weaver site in the show notes and the
Hmm.
webpage. So it's such a tremendous resource that's been of great value to us, and I definitely recommend that to folks in the newsletter. Um, in a minute, June, I want to come back to relationships and place. But do want to hit first on, you talked about self-organizing and books. What are a couple books that you feel like are really essential to this work, and ways that people, you talked about self-organizing being the missing piece? Well, in what way?
Well, so there are a bunch of books, and maybe we can just, I know David Ehrlichman,
Hmm.
Impact Networks,
Hmm.
and there's one by Pete Plastrick. He's gotten two books. I will have to get all but his latest one, which is much more about scale, which has got some great stuff in it.
Great.
The and David's book has stuff on self-organizing. You can the
Yeah.
Network Weaver Handbook, which you can
Hmm.
get a PDF copy for very little, and it's got sections on self-organizing as well, and then again resources there. Um, but what was the question?
Yeah, so what are some of those? So
what
you talked
what
about, I know there's a couple
yeah.
questions there together. You talked about self-organizing being the missing piece.
Hmm.
In what way? What?
Well, I mean, again, I think it's like you need to, first of all, I don't think we know enough, especially we don't know what we don't know and what we can't see. And so we've got to jar ourselves out of our old ways of thinking and doing and being. And the thing about self-organizing is that it is like helping us move into this thing where we're not waiting for somebody to tell us what to do, but we are looking around, we're noticing where something could make a difference, and we're stepping up and with gathering some friends and saying, oh, we could try something here.
Hmm.
So it's getting people to initiate, to experiment and try out new things, to
Hmm.
see what's really going to work. How do we really shift? Systems are massive. The food
Yes.
system, it's massive.
Yes.
How do we begin to change that? And
Yes.
uh, so I think self-organizing can help us be more strategic in some of our activities. We need to
Hmm.
understand the whole system and see where we might nudge it. Where's change already starting to
Hmm.
happen?
Oh, that's great.
And
Yeah.
then kind of like trying to accelerate and move that, kind of open up. It's like we're
Hmm.
dandelions in the concrete and little
Yes.
cracks in the concrete. If you ever seen like dandelions and
Hmm.
weeds, they
Yeah.
get in that crack, and before you know it, the concrete is starting to
Bunk,
fall
bunk.
apart.
Yeah,
But
totally.
how do we find the cracks, and how do
Hmm.
we bring together the little leaves and little specks of dirt and make a dandelion and get that root going deep down into our place and cracking open the concrete? So
Hmm.
that's what self-organizing helps us do. And also, self-organizing is about learning. Like if you look at self-organizing, that's how nature works. Like, so you look at termite castles, and
Hmm.
these are these beautiful, massive structures in almost every continent of the world, but each one is designed to fit into that place.
Hmm.
And they're fabulous air conditioning. They go down often 30, 50 feet into the ground to make it cool for the little babies.
Yeah.
Now, there is not a boss in that whole termite castle of maybe 1 million termites. There's no boss.
Hmm.
What they do is they pay attention to each other, and they notice what's working and what's not. And when something's working, they send out pheromones, little scents to draw other
Hmm.
termites to them. And then together they collaborate on kind of making another part of the termite castle. So they pay attention, they they work collaboratively really well. They learn from what they're doing, and all this without any boss at all. And, you
Hmm.
know, can we learn from nature and
Mm.
realize that you can create, wonderful new systems, or at least partially new systems, just by being able to this power of self-organization.
Hmm. Mm. What a beautiful analogy. So tuning in, paying attention, communicating what works and also what doesn't,
And
how
what
to
doesn't work,
grow,
right? Stop doing what's not
what's not
working.
working,
Hey, please.
changing. Love that. I love that.
Uh-huh.
So you talked earlier, you brought in about some of the work happening in Africa where people, or in other cultures where there hasn't been such a sense of separation from
Mm-hmm.
place or
Mm-hmm.
power over. And I wanted to just really, lift that up around um, my dad's side of the family is a mining family from the Rock Creek and Dry Creek, kind of Neoma area in southern West
Mm-hmm.
Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time you were talking about the Johns Hopkins rainbow circle of work taking place in the food
Mm-hmm.
policy
Mm-hmm.
realm. And on the other side of my family, my grandfather studied at Hopkins, and my grandmother started the first nursery
Ah,
school at Hopkins. So it's been this, and my
oh.
grandfather was a firefly scientist trained at Hopkins. So this kind of interesting collision of worlds. And when you mentioned that circle, my mind immediately went to Mary Hufford and Betsy Taylor's work around the circular round of activities from the Rock Creek and Dry Creek area, the Culver Valley area in southern West Virginia, where my dad's family was. Have you seen this? It's just
I,
really,
I don't
gosh,
think I'm gonna
such a beautiful
give me a link.
depiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Uh-huh.
be happy to send you a link and we can put it in the show notes. Now it's on the Smithsonian Folkways website, but it's this
Mm.
graphic depiction of the calendar year and
Mm-hmm.
what activities are like just people inherently do, they know to do in different calendar
Mm-hmm.
months. So, in it's, and then it's what plants are coming in, and what to gather and what
Mm-hmm.
activities people are doing connected with the
Mm-hmm.
season. So in the fall, leaves are dropping, people might be gathering firewood or gathering roots, and then go through in the winter months, in the spring, gathering morels and planting. And
Mm.
it's this, and then the actual graphic has links that you can click on and then hear oral histories, hearing people
Oh,
talk
nice,
about the
nice.
ways that they're connected with place.
Yes.
And some of the work that, gosh, I really love working in Southwest Virginia and Central Appalachia
Mm-hmm.
because this is just my experience, but
Uh-huh.
there's a real sense of belonging to
Mm-hmm.
place and to each other that's still really intact often. And it
Yes,
allows people
yes.
to like drop into the work and self-organize and build relationships, but there's not a questioning that happens. It's almost a body sense of wisdom of being connected to
Mm-hmm.
place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Rather than a head place. And to, I guess, wrap this all up, I'm looking out my window at our orchard here, where we are based
Mm-hmm.
in Central Virginia, and our forest garden. We have fruit trees in multiple layers. And we put that system in about 10 years ago, with pigs and then swales on contour and then a
Nice,
workshop and,
nice.
a lot of things. And it was fascinating, June, in that the only way I really know how to describe it is I became into relationship with our land
Right,
through
right,
that
right.
process. It was this co-creating, it was this
Mm-hmm.
listening, it was this tending to process that was really meaningful, that belonged me to this
Mm-hmm.
place from the outside in. So I just really wanted to emphasize what you were talking about, that sense of
And
place
the
in
other
the work.
piece is
Yeah.
that so much of what in interacting, with the landscape is collaborative in
Mm,
Appalachia.
mm-hmm.
So, for example, whether it's, going out together to gather mushroom morels soon,
Mhm,
next week, I'm
mhm,
hoping
mhm.
here, or making the food, making the apple butter, pressing cider. Those kind of activities are still very collaborative around here. Last year, two young women and I got together on our deck and got huge amounts of tomatoes and made salsa
Yum.
together, and we just had so much fun, and we're going to invite more people this
Yeah,
year.
that's great.
So it's this, thing to remember, and because so much of you know American farming is nuclear family,
Mm,
but I think in Appalachia it was much more community driven, and I think that's an example of how we can go to fragments of the relational economics that still exist here and just amplify and uh, visualize them to others,
mm-hmm. I love that. Beautiful.
because we need community.
Yes,
I
we
think
do.
that's the thing. Consumption has pushed out community, and I think the more we build community, the less we care
Mm-hmm.
at all about
Mm-hmm.
the tradition, the forms of American consumption that
Yeah.
we see all around us.
Connecting from within. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, in just a moment, I want to move into our quick roller questions to wrap it up and bring it back to you. But do you anything else you want to share about the beauty of networks for transformation and the book or digital resource that you're working on about the ways that you really feel like transformation can happen as we move forward in the next 100, 200, 300 years?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in June?
I mean, I just think that the importance of learning and reflection, taking a lot of time, like I'm suggesting to people, they spend at least a quarter to a third of their time
Mm-hmm.
not doing, but actually taking time to step back and reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, what are we learning? What are we noticing?
Yes.
Oh, what surprised us?
Mm-hmm.
What could we do more of?
Mm-hmm.
How could we, what does this mean? What do we need to pay attention to because this happened? I mean, there's just so much richness. We figured out so much, and we don't even realize it because
Yes.
we're moving on to the next thing.
Yes.
So moving
Yes.
out of that
Woo.
busyness,
Yes.
moving out of busyness. Oh my gosh, that
Mm-hmm.
itself is
Yes.
transformative. Taking
Mm-hmm.
time to reflect, to care about each other, to eat good food together before we have a meeting.
Yes.
So, just watching the pace of things and taking time to just look at and notice what is going on. I think that's really transformative
Mm.
just in
Yes.
itself. So,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Because when we keep just staying in the hamster wheel of busyness on to the next
mhm.
thing, then it also really keeps us stuck, at least from my experience, in our heads.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And then we don't
Mhm.
connect to the body wisdom and the chance to learn and reflect and paying attention and what is the need and where is you talked earlier, June, about that whole system. Where is change happening and where to accelerate it? So if we're not
Mhm.
dropping
Mhm.
back into that learning, then we just start doing
Mhm.
things that for the sake of doing. So I really appreciate that
Mhm.
you brought that up.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you've talked to some degree about the things that bring you joy. It sounded like from your the joy in your voice about food and place and salsa. Tell us more, June, about what brings you joy in your own life.
Well, my 5-year-old granddaughter
Mm.
came over this weekend, and fell in love with reading.
Yes, that's so
And
great.
I just, oh my gosh, you just
So
can't
great.
believe that a person can. She said, I love to weed. I just love it. And
That's
we
so great.
we spent about a half an hour going around digging up weeds and putting them in a bucket, putting them in the compost pile,
Yeah.
and just the joy on her face from both, just getting that. She says, I love to get dirty.
It's so great. I love that. I
So,
love that.
just seeing that and passing on my joy of working in the garden to, somebody younger, and just seeing how healthy and life-giving it can be to connect, just on every level, like right down in the yard, connecting, to all the way to connecting with people in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that connection that it brings us all joy. And I just think that there's just this huge welling of joy just waiting for us.
Mm,
But we need to reach out to others and really
mm,
spend the time building those relationships that are
yes.
going to make our lives worth living.
Mm-hmm. Mm, love that. Making our lives worth living. Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you. So, you've talked about this a little bit, but what keeps you moving forward on the days you struggle?
Oh, well, I just have this really strong sense that, I like everybody else can make a difference in just,
Yeah.
whatever you do. So I just feel like, yeah, whenever I kind of lose it a little bit, I say, I am who I am, and I know I have all these limitations,
Mm,
but I know that I've been able to make a difference,
mm-hmm.
especially when I'm working with others, and
Mm-hmm.
and that we all have this capacity, and it
Mm-hmm.
can be so amplified, when we work with others, when we reach out to others, and so and it's its own joy, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, um and
Yeah.
even the conflict and the hard stuff is joyful,
Yeah.
in the long run. And I think people need to realize, hey, the deeper you go and the harder it gets for a while, that it's just opening up the volcano of
Mm-hmm.
goodness.
Yes. There's that line that's repeated a lot, things that happen for us, not to us. And I know in my own life, that sense of uncovering, the
Mm-hmm.
struggle and learning, what
Mm-hmm.
the gifts are in that struggle. Um, Staying connected, it can be hard to stay connected through struggle, but the gifts that emerge through struggle are tremendous. It's taken me a long time and
Right,
gray
right.
hairs to understand that, but really what
Yeah.
gifts struggle can offer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and at the collaborative scale, the network scale too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
any other key lessons learned you want to share with others, June, who are working to create change in their lives and communities and regions?
Yeah, I mean, just that just find something to do with others. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just as simple as
It
that.
is.
It's like,
Yes.
taking time to notice what's going on, and notice your own reaction. Like, what are you
Mm.
drawn to? We don't have,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a right place or a wrong place to work. There's
Yes.
just like, what really excites you? What kind of feeds you, what where do you notice your gifts, um shining a little brighter,
Yes.
and so just figuring out, and it can take a while. Boy, I wandered around in the wilderness for quite a while before I figured out
Yeah.
what I was gonna where I was gonna land.
Mm-hmm.
And so, don't be discouraged if you try something, but investing in learning how to have good relationships is, and how to listen, how to facilitate. Oh, these are just huge gifts. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're on a learning right now, you're on a learning path, just learning all those kinds of skills that will help you have, and your community have better, and deeper, and more impactful relationships.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Mm-hmm. Wandering in the wilderness. Yes, we do that periodically. That's
Yes,
great.
oh yes.
So, June, any other thoughts or reflections you'd like to share? And tell us how people can learn more about you and your work.
Well, I am on Medium. Maybe you can put that Medium
Yeah.
link. I, I think that lots of people, it's not my work so much anymore, but lots of
Mm-hmm.
people working on this. And
Mm-hmm.
again, Network Weaver is just a great place, a
Yeah.
wonderful blog posts there, other people that you can reach out to, I think most of the people there are quite accessible, and you can reach out to them and just have some conversations. Lots of good books. Many of them are reviewed in the blog posts. And so there's no lack of resources out there and people who are willing to be mentors, collaborators, whatever you need and want. Lots of great. Oh, Phyto Network. So
Mm-hmm.
Phyto.network is uh, another international group for
Mm-hmm.
networks of networks, and they're going to be having starting next Monday. There's going to be a networks festival that I
Great.
really encourage
That's
people.
great.
So if you look up Fito
Great.
network, you can find out, and there'll be lots of breakout time there where you can meet people from all over the world who
That's
are
so great.
working in all kinds of different networks. So a
That's
few
great. We'll
things to
share that
get
out
you
on social.
started there.
That's great. Thanks, June, for those resources. And thank you for such a beautiful conversation today. I really appreciate it. And so much good wisdom to share and lifting up the work of others, and appreciate you leading the way. So thanks for
Well,
joining
thank you,
today.
Christine, for being such an eloquent and provocative interviewer.
Well, it's been a delight. Yeah.
Adding your own experience, which I love the stories
Mhm.
that you shared.
Yeah. Thanks, June. Thanks again so much for joining. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I loved every minute. Take
Mhm.
care.